10:12 is our time, and it's good to have this gentleman back. His name is Dan Wass. He is the author of the book Good Gun, Bad Guy. And Dan, it's great to have you back on the program again. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me. It's always great to talk to you.
Well, we are in contact quite a bit on Facebook, talking about various things. And let's before we get into the interview too terribly much here, let's talk a little bit about the book itself, Good Gun, Bad Guy, the reason why you decided to put this book together, and tell us a little bit about what's in it.
Well, okay, so I wrote Good Gun, Bad Guy because I got sick and tired of watching anti-gun media and politicians, use every possible tactic and tool they could to demonize guns and gun owners. It's always about making the gun bad and scary and all these things. And I'm thinking to myself, what about, the bad guy? Shouldn't we be talking about the bad guy? So I wrote a blog called Fear of Guns, and people can find that. And it's what started this whole book. And I'll give you a brief description of my life and where I came from. I was raised in a pro-gun family. We had guns. My father and I went shooting, hunting, and stuff. So I never had any problem growing up with guns. But at one point, after my father died, I went anti-gun. And it was the strangest thing because I let the propaganda and all the media hype and all the nonsense take over emotions, and logic kind of went out the window. So I started to actually believe the nonsense, even though I'd come from a pro-gun family and we never, ever had any issues. Eventually I came back around and let logic, see its way through. And at one point my wife and I had an incident, and I write about this in Good Gun, in more detail, but we had an incident in a parking lot with a guy, and it could have been a life-threatening situation. Luckily, we managed to make it out unharmed, and I didn't know if this guy had a gun, a knife, or anything, or whatever. So it was a little bit scary, and I apologize to my wife for not being able to defend her in a time that I believe I should have. That's my responsibility as a man. Protect your family, protect your wife, protect yourself. And in that instance, I don't think I would have been able to because I didn't know if what he was capable of as far as weapons and things like that. So anyway, I told her, I said, I'm getting a gun, and I want to be able to do the right thing. And everything kind of turned around in that moment. So kind of that aha moment, and everything just turned around. I realized how important it really is to be able to defend yourself. So I wrote a blog about that story, and it got picked up by a bunch of websites. It started going crazy, and I kept writing, and I don't know how or why, but I just kept writing. And the book kind of wrote itself. I mean, and some of the chapters start talking about gun-free zones and the false narrative created by the media. How people are being ignorant. We have a chapter called I'm Right, You're Wrong, Building Utopia, Lies, Lies, and More Lies. And the book just started writing itself. So that's kind of the summary of how the book began.
It's interesting because, since we talked last time, a lot has happened. A lot has occurred in the United States, and a lot of what we're seeing in this day is aimed at law enforcement. What happened in Dallas, what happened in Baton Rouge, what's happened here in this state as well, the state of Missouri, and crimes against law enforcement. And it's amazing how you hear people come out and talk about gun control, and we need to take the guns out of the hands of people, and certainly when you talk about things like gun-free zones. Boy, these are just some great opportunities for criminals in this country to really soak that information up and utilize that to prey on people in a lot of different situations and scenarios. And even though you hear people talking about gun control, what's interesting is some of the numbers that I've been reading about and hearing about in terms of gun sales in this country. So again, it's the mainstream media, it's politicians versus the American people, but you don't ever hear the opposite side of that story. Again, when we talk about gun control, when we talk about gun-free zones, it's essentially enabling criminals and letting them know that there are places where innocent people, where law-abiding citizens, frequent, and if it's a school, if it's a certain area that's a gun-free zone, it almost makes it pretty easy pickings for anybody who would, is I guess maybe similar to your situation, be able to step in and rob someone or do harm or kill someone based on whatever it is their motivation was for being there in the first place.
Well, that's all true. And the thing is, the way people are manipulated through the media is really sickening. And what I realized while writing this book is that there are two types of anti-gunners. And you and I have talked. I think I mentioned this to you before, but it's important that I explain the two different people involved when it comes to anti-gun. You have the anti-gunner, which is typically someone who has been misled by the media. They're scared of guns, never had guns. They don't know anything about them. They've been, misled by the media, programmed to believe that guns are dangerous and scary. And rather than learn, they just want to see guns go away. They don't necessarily want our rights to go away, but they would be happy if guns just, were heavily regulated or just magically disappeared. Those are the anti-gunners. But then you have the anti-second radicals, the anti-Second Amendment radicals. They're the ones who actually do want our rights taken away, and they fight hard every day to make sure that it happens. They're the ones who would be cheering in the streets if the Second Amendment was, gone. Any gun regulation to them is good. So the anti-gunners or the anti-Second Amendment radicals are always influencing the anti-gunners. And what I've noticed, and one thing, I talk to anti-gunners all the time, and some of them are people I know, some are even friends, and some of them are just informants. They just don't know it. But the two common things that come up when I talk to them about guns is fear and hate. Now, they've been trained like puppies to fear guns. They're taught that guns are dangerous and unpredictable. But they've also been trained to hate gun owners like you and me. I know, Kevin, I know you're a gun owner, and they've been trained to hate us because they believe that we are irresponsibly and intentionally putting them in danger. So now, think about it for a minute. Anti-gunners are taught to hate you and the NRA because to them, we're the bad guys. And they're not taught to fear. This is the interesting piece. They're not taught to fear the gun owner. They're taught to hate the gun owner. Because, you see, if they were taught to fear us, they wouldn't lash out against gun ownership. They're taught to fear the gun, which is why they'll never go to the range and learn. And they're taught to hate you, the gun owner, so they stay angry and fight. That's the leverage that anti-Second Amendment radicals have over anti-gunners. They're being manipulated, and they don't even know it.
I sometimes get confused with people, especially people who I consider to be intelligent, that don't, at least as you mentioned, do the research and at least take the time to be educated on the subject. Maybe in some instances, Dan, it takes something along the lines of what occurred in your life with you and your wife, confronted by someone, and it makes them realize and understand that we are so very vulnerable as a society. And in a lot of cases, that's the way our government wants us to be. They want us to be vulnerable because every time there's an issue, every time there's a problem, they want us to run to them for the solution. And that indeed concerns us along the lines of owning guns. They don't want us to own guns because they don't want us to be able to protect ourselves, because if we can protect ourselves, then what good is the government in that capacity? Well, right, and then we can also talk about tyrannical governments and things like that, and that's all possible too. But sure, and having the media in their pocket is so dangerous for the people. It's a scary piece. And certainly when we hear about certain situations. What happened in Orlando, that nightclub incident in Orlando, which automatically went from the person who was in that nightclub and killed all of those people. And you always hear, well, if one person would have had a gun, certainly the death rate could have been a lot lower, could have been possibly something that didn't exist at all because someone would have stepped in and taken that guy out. But it wasn't about that person. It wasn't about that person's motives. All of a sudden, the federal government is spinning that and twisting it and making it look like it's a gun issue, when indeed the gun wasn't the one responsible. It was the person who had the gun and the motives of that particular person and all of the things that that person had been looking at prior to that incident taking place.
Well, and here's the thing, and they always want you focused on either the gun, the laws, or the statistics. Because if they can keep everyone's attention on the gun, it takes the focus off what's really going on, and that's violent human behavior. That's an area they don't want to talk about because it doesn't help their agenda. If we were to talk about violent human behavior, we'd have to talk about, gang violence, inner city crime. We'd have to talk about terrorism, radical Islamic terrorism that's happening right here in America. We'd have to talk about all this stuff. And basically what we'd be doing if we really started talking about that stuff is we'd be shining a spotlight on failed liberal policies. So they don't want you to talk about that. It's always going to be focused on the gun. And what I try to do is I try to help people see that what they're doing is they're constantly putting that focus back on the gun because over here they're not showing you why all this human violence is occurring. Here's the thing. In this country we have over 1 million violent acts per year, and that number is heavily influenced by key areas like Washington, D.C., Detroit, Chicago, places like that. And they're all highly gun-restricted areas. In other words, you're not allowed to carry a gun and defend yourself in those cities. Yet those are the areas with the highest crime, and those are Democrat-run. If politicians really wanted those numbers to go down, they would revisit those failed gun policies. They see what's going on. They understand it. So you got to ask yourself, do those high numbers of violent crimes hurt or help the anti-gun agenda? And I know you and I have talked about this before. And it's just so clear to me, and it's so clear to so many people, but yet there are many people who just don't get it.
I would say after a weekend or a holiday weekend, or for that matter, any weekend in the city of Chicago, you always hear about all of the gun violence that takes place and how the crime rate is just so unbelievably sky high, and the way innocent people are killed. And in a lot of instances, you always hear at some point about a child being shot or a child being shot and killed. And it boggles the mind, especially when our President Barack Obama is from Illinois and represented the city of Chicago and talks about how great things are in Chicago, how we all know differently, and how we know that, again, with the use of the media, you can take these types of events and you can spin them any way you like. But obviously, I think people who really do their research and look into these sorts of things, Dan, they know exactly what's going on. 10:25 is our time. Dan, we need to step aside and take our first break. Dan Wass, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, he is my guest on the Morning Magazine on KRMS.
You have news you need when you need it. The news you want when you want it.
News Talk KRMS.
10:29 is our time. We're up to 88 degrees and a mostly clear sky. Heat advisory goes into effect at 1 o'clock this afternoon, remains in effect until 8 o'clock tonight. My guest, Dan Wass, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy. And Dan, in going through the book, I noticed you offer a lot of statistics. You back up what you're talking about in this particular book with a lot of facts, a lot of figures, and a lot of research. Was there anything when you were doing the research for this book that really jumped out at you, really surprised you, and would probably do the same to other folks who may pick up the book and give it a read?
Well, Yeah, there was a lot of research, and one thing that was interesting was the number of gun-related, and I didn't want to make this about statistics. This book really wasn't about statistics, but when you're writing something like this, it's part of it. And I figured if I'm going to do a book like this, I do want to include facts. One of the things that was interesting was FBI reported in 2012 that there were 8,855 gun deaths in America. 8,855. But here's where it gets interesting. IIHS reported that the number of auto-related deaths in America was 33,561. And as if that's not enough, the number of cigarette-related deaths in America were 480,000. So it just goes to show you where the media wants to focus, their attention.
Absolutely. If you wouldn't mind, there's some things. There's a couple of things in here I wanted to quote out of the book from the chapter "Ignorance is Bliss," and you talk about government will always protect your freedoms. It says all we have to do to destroy this illogical thinking is look at all the countries that stole the freedom of their people immediately after controlling their use of guns. 1911, Turkey enacted gun control and soon after killed 1.5 million Armenians. 1929, the Soviet Union enacted gun control and over the next 24 years killed approximately 20 million who opposed government policy. 1935, China enacted gun control and killed 20 million political dissidents within 17 years. 1938, Germany enacted gun control and killed 13 million Jews in the 7 years that followed. 1956, Cambodia enacted gun control and killed 1 million people by 1977. 1964, Guatemala enacted gun control and killed 100,000 Mayan Indians by 1981. In 1970, Uganda enacted gun control. By 1979, 300,000 Christians were killed. And what's interesting about it, as they enact gun control in order to make us think that the government is going to take care of us and make this a safer country, they're also setting us up for the possibility of, as you take the rights away from the citizens and the citizens try to rise up against you, what's to say that the very government that says it's going to protect you does not turn on its own citizens?
And isn't it amazing that there are so many people still in this country who turn a blind eye to that? Even after you have the evidence, and even after, all it takes for some people is a sweet-talking politician. Mm-hmm. And they can be convinced of anything. Well, the good news is that there are many more patriots in this country, many more than you would think, because the media won't show that part, And I think what we're having right now is an awareness of people who actually understand, and I think it's the majority of people who do understand this, exactly what you just read, that this could happen here in America. So I think we're on the right track. My goal is to make sure that as many people that I talk to, I can help them understand.
And I understand you said earlier that this is not a book of facts, but you have to have that information in here in order to back up the point that you're trying to make. And I would say at some particular point, when you talk about people who have a fear of guns for one reason or another, maybe something happened in their life that caused them to fear guns. Someone they know was murdered. Maybe they had a close call in a situation with someone who had a gun. Maybe something happened as a child, and sometimes, as unfortunate as it is, guns fall into the hands of children. Normally that's because the people that own the gun in the first place don't take care of it properly. They don't store it. They don't keep it the way you should keep a gun in a home where there are children. And so they have some sort of an instance that just really sticks with them for the rest of their lives. And I understand that. And, there's no denying that instances like that occur. But I think in a lot of instances, hey, that's fine, that's understandable. If you don't feel comfortable around firearms of any kind, I understand that, but certainly I wish to have a firearm. I wish to protect myself and my family. And please, if you're not comfortable with it, I get that. But I've taken the time to learn, to become educated, to understand how to properly utilize a firearm, how to store it, how to clean it, things that I need to do. Please don't let the government take my right away.
Well, sure. And a lot of people are not inclined to have guns. They just aren't. They just don't have the mindset for it. And that's okay. Nobody's saying that everybody, I think that's another misconception is that, anti-gunners think that pro-gunners want everybody to have guns, like want to pass them out like it's a cafeteria or something. That's just so far from the truth. There are some people like you and me who gravitate toward guns, and we do well with them, and we enjoy them, and we can handle them well, and we have a good understanding. There are many people who just don't and should probably never have them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a large part of it is that those people who respect firearms, those people who take the time to get educated, those people who take the time to train, they know what it's all about. And again, they're just saying, hey, listen, if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. I respect your rights to not have a firearm or be around firearms. But as far as things go, I want that right. It's in the Constitution as a way to say, hey, listen, if something happens, the government decides one day that they want to take over, I'm going to be in a position where I'm going to protect myself and my family and others who wish to be protected. But another aspect of what we're seeing now more and more is with conceal and carry in certain states, with open carry in some states. It's really starting to make a noticeable dent in the crime rate in certain areas, and that's because a lot of these people that would typically utilize a gun to rob or hurt someone don't know whether in this day and age people are packing, and maybe it's not a good idea to walk into a store and try to rob the people behind the counter, or it's not a good idea to walk up to someone in a parking lot and try and take their car keys away from them, because you never know when that person may be able to reach into their purse, that person may be able to reach into their pocket, wherever they're holstering a firearm, and defend themselves.
Well, I agree. And it's always the case when more people have concealed carry, the crime rate goes down. It's just it's undeniable, yet they deny it. So I always wonder how is it that anti-gunners, after watching people who've been rendered defenseless getting killed in coffee shops, concerts, wherever, how is it that they can still justify supporting this cause that clearly doesn't make any sense? You have to ask yourself, why are they so committed to the fight when the data doesn't support their argument? But I believe that it's because they need to win, and they can't be proven wrong on this. Now, remember, anti-gunners have supported this cause for a long time, and if they were to admit that they were wrong this whole time, that would destroy them. So I believe it's not about what it would mean to the anti-gun agenda if it were to fall apart. This is more about what it would say about the anti-gun supporter if they were to be wrong. See, they've been supported the cause for so long, and it's almost like they can't turn back. And even as the data, like we're talking about, as gun crimes go down, concealed carry goes up. It's almost like they can't admit to it. So it's like the kid who gets caught stealing the chocolate bar, and he lies to his mom. No, I didn't take it. Yet he's got chocolate all over his face. The data is there, and yet they still deny it. I believe it's because they don't want to be wrong, and they must win.
That's one of the things that you discuss in your book, Chapter 9, I'm Right, You're Wrong, Good Gun, Bad Guy, the author Dan Wass. Dan, you mind if we take a couple of phone calls here?
Absolutely. No, go ahead.
Let's jump in. Caller, I appreciate you holding on. You're on KRMS. Good morning.
Excellent interview, KB, and I applaud your guest here for the work that he's done and continues to do in this matter. To the extent that they can make us take our eyes off of the ball, if I can speak metaphorically here, it's not about the gun. It's about disarming folks, but guns are the first step only. Witness overnight the occurring in Europe, was it not, where how many people were stabbed by, it was a knife? Mm-hmm. The next thing on their agenda, of course, literally is knife control. And I used to think, oh, golly, that's just, you're just poo-pooing about that or you're joking. But no, it's about disarming. And he recounts historically what happens in culture after culture when the means, whatever the primary means, usually in the last couple hundred years it's been firearms, for the citizenry to defend itself has been removed. Totalitarianism and despots are the ones that take over. So kudos for continuing on that path and driving that home, and I would submit perhaps that these folks that can't admit they're wrong are probably related to the Fonz, because he could never say I was wrong.
That's so funny. Yeah, he couldn't say it.
Thanks for the phone call. And I guess, Dan, again, it doesn't really make any difference what level it was. If it was back in medieval times, they'd take away their pitchforks or whatever implements that could possibly be used to defend the farmers or the citizenry could defend themselves with. And as the caller alluded to, of course, knives. You're hearing more and more about attacks in Europe. Yep. The priest that was stabbed in Europe. I mean, who stabs a priest, in all honesty? Who stabs a priest? But obviously, someone who has a knife. So any means of disarming people and taking away the ability for them to defend themselves, and I guess you don't really understand, you don't understand it, you don't realize it until you're in a situation where somebody approaches you. If you don't have a knife, if you don't have a gun, if you don't have the thing, something that you need in order to defend yourself, well, then you're pretty much helpless. 10:41 is our time, Dan. We need to step aside, take another quick break. Caller, I see you there. You can hold through the break or join us on the other side. We're talking with Dan Wass. He's the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical. And you're listening to the Morning Magazine on KRMS.
The Ozarks Today.
A higher plane of consciousness and awareness.
News Talk KRMS.
Just about 10:45, 88 degrees, sunshine, heat advisory in effect from 1 this afternoon until 8 tonight. My guest, Dan Wass, the book Good Gun, Bad Guy. And Dan, we've got a full bank of phones, so let's take some calls. Caller, thanks for holding. You're on KRMS. Good morning.
Hi, KB.
Hi there.
I am firmly convinced that the elite, the power brokers, the people like Hillary and Soros and the corporates know exactly what they're doing. But I'm coming to the conclusion over time that a very large percentage of the population of America is brain damaged because, I mean, it's partly for humor, but they constantly describe the U.S. as evil, corrupt. There's those nasty 1%ers. They're out to screw us and rape the rest of the world. But there's this underlying belief that, or deception, self-deception, that it could never happen in the United States. We could never see guns taken away and the population oppressed, and that's just mentally ill.
Thank you for your phone call.
That was my only comment. Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, she's right. People actually believe that just because we live in America that we're somehow in this bubble, and I mean, in some respects maybe, but when it comes to governments doing the wrong thing, I think it's quite possible, and I think actually it's happening. It's happened in many respects.
I think it's interesting because if anybody was paying attention here for the last several months, that these folks were running to get the nomination from their respective parties, Republicans, Democrats. One of the Democrats, a gentleman by the name of Bernie Sanders, who was somebody who tagged himself as a democratic socialist. And look around at some of the other parts of the world where socialism has crept into the lives of these people, and essentially what happened. We talked about what happened in Russia and all of the people that once gun control was established that died at the hands of the government, because it can happen here. And I think for us to sit around and believe that it can't is almost ridiculous. Dan, let's go back to the phones. Got some more phone callers there. Caller, thanks for holding. You're on KRMS. Good morning.
Yeah, a very interesting show. I'll make it as quick as I can. I grew up in the middle 50s, and there was more handguns around at that time than people really knew. But they didn't use them for bad purposes, mainly for protection. But like I say, I was just a teenager, and there was a guy that kind of run a crowd into our group, and he was a thug, and he carried a .32 caliber pistol with him all the time. And one day he pushed me around and embarrassed me, and I was ready. The next time I knew I was going to meet him, I put my dad's pistol in my pocket. And when I met up with him, I showed him I had a handgun, and I knew he had one. And right then, the light bulb went off in my head, and I realized what the word equalizer meant. I could stand toe-to-toe to this guy and feel equal. You understand what I mean? It was a total, it was just like a light bulb went off. I'm equal to him because I can take care of myself. That's all I want to say.
It's so true what he's saying. You know, he was just as strong, just as powerful, and just as the other guy when he had that means to defend himself. Otherwise, the guy with the weapon could have had his way.
1049. Let's go back to the phones. Caller, thanks for holding on. You're on KRMS. Good morning.
Morning, KB.
Good morning, sir.
Wasn't the fact that the Japanese emperor, didn't he say he would never put troops on the ground in the United States because we had the biggest army in the world?
I
referring to the citizens being armed?
Right.
Oh, yes. I thought that's what he was talking about. Yes. There's a gun behind every blade of grass in America.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks for the phone call. Let's go and take another phone call. Caller, good morning. You're on KRMS with Dan Wass, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy. Good morning.
Good morning. Great interview.
Thank you.
I just wanted to relate a little story that I had a couple, 3 years ago. My neighbor and myself heard about a program offered at a range up by Jefferson City called First Shots. So we took our ladies up there. They were like most ladies, little leery of guns and whatever. And they went through the whole program with the safety and handling and all that, and came away loving it. I don't know if they get empowered by it or whatever, but they love to go to the range now and have their fun. So just another story.
And that's and thank you for the phone call. And that's something we're seeing more and more of. Women who use these opportunities as social gatherings, but more importantly, groups of women that are getting together and forming these various groups that teach and educate and get out at a gun range and take the opportunity to be a part of not only the social aspect of women getting together, but more importantly, learning the aspect of what it's like to handle a firearm. So many of these clubs and groups, they bring in women who have never handled a firearm, or maybe women who don't feel comfortable handling a firearm. But once they're among other women, and the conversation and the education and the training all fall into line, it's amazing how many of these women come around and say, look what I've been missing for all these years and all these opportunities where I could have had something had there been trouble. Now I'm involved with one of these groups, and certainly it's made a huge difference in their lives.
Well, yeah, Kevin, and our friend Jan Morgan over at the Gun Cave in Arkansas, she is just fantastic when it comes to this sort of thing, because she can relate to women who are coming into gun ownership who for the first time, and she does a fantastic job. So yeah, I think it's great that women are getting involved, and that we do have some women patriots out there who are helping the process.
1052. Jan does an incredible job, and of course, I would look her up on Facebook and check out some of the things that she posts in regards to not only what's going on with firearms in this country, but who are some of the players in the anti-gun game, if you will, anti-gunners, folks that are kind of spearheading the drive for gun control in this country. Let's take another phone call. Caller, thanks for calling in this morning. You're on KRMS.
Good morning, KB. If anyone remembers the lovely Vicki Kramer that used to be there, she also does a lot with women and guns, and she has some type of, club.
Pumps and pistols, or pistols and pumps, I believe is what it's called.
Right. You can check it out online if you women want to get involved with that, and just wanted to give her a little pitch because I haven't seen her in a while, but I just thought I'd mention it for you guys.
Thanks for the phone call.
Thank you.
There's a number of groups, a girl and a gun, well-armed women. There's a number of groups and organizations around here that are really starting to flourish and take off. Dan, let's take one more phone call before we run out of time. We want to talk some more about the book and take the opportunity to get some thoughts from our listeners here. Caller, good morning. You're on KRMS.
Are you speaking to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I was born in the Ozarks, and I was around guns all my life, and all of us were taught how to be careful with them and use them. I will soon be 74. I got my concealed carry permit several years ago. I have a gun in my car right now.
Good for you.
If I ever have a breakdown in my car and I don't have cell service, if somebody approaches me, I can protect myself against criminals. And even if they outlaw guns, I will always have a gun, as will all the outlaws. Thank you.
Thank you for the phone call.
Some people feel that way. Yep.
Dan, it's 10:54. We've got a couple of minutes left in the hour. And again, let's kind of do a bit of a recap. Good Gun, Bad Guy, and put a little focus on what this book is about and where folks can find it.
Well, they can find it at goodgunbadguy.net or .com. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, online. You can find it just about anywhere. And just to summarize what the book is about, it's about uncovering the strategies and tactics of the anti-gun side of the argument and uncovering their malicious intent. Like I said before, it's not necessarily a book about statistics, although there are a lot of statistics in the book. And a lot of the stuff comes from FBI. And John Lott data is always great. And but we have all the statistics in our favor. And we get kind of tired about talking and fighting about statistics and what statistics are good and accurate and which ones aren't, what laws we should have and how many rounds we should have in our magazines. So you get kind of tired of that. I wanted to talk about what's really going on, and that's what Good Gun, Bad Guy is about. It's about the mind manipulation of people. It's about the strategies that are being used to mislead people and demonize guns and gun owners. Because if we don't understand their minds, we don't have a chance.
And, at some point, I agree with everything that you're talking about there, but I think at some point you can offer up as much information as you want, but there are still going to be those people that don't buy into it, that don't look at it, don't weigh the evidence that's right there in front of them for one reason or another. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do anything about those people. You're always going to run into people who will fight you at every twist and turn. And then, Dan, I think you take it upon yourself to do what's right for you, to do what's right for your family, to protect yourself, to get the necessary education, to get the necessary training. I know everybody in my family, we are going to, I think before my son takes off for college, now that he's old enough, we're all going to go and get the conceal and carry as a family and utilize that opportunity to understand what it means to protect ourselves and to protect others. But of course, it starts with you first and then kind of goes from there.
Good for you. Yeah, totally agree.
Dan Wass, Good Gun, Bad Guy, great book. It was great to have all of the listener input, and it was definitely great to have you back again and continued success with the book and stay in touch, and we'll get you back in here again soon.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. That is Dan Wass. Again, Good Gun, Bad Guy. The book available to you by going to the website, and again, all of the usual suspects. 10:57. Got to take my last break. This is going to take us up to the top of the hour. You're listening to the Morning Magazine on KRMS.